And on New Year's Day, Alexis told the defendant that their relationship had come to an end. On Friday, January 11th, 2019, so just about 10 or 11 so days later, Alexis made plans that night to go out with her close friend, Caitlin Avery, who's also her cousin, and you will hear from Caitlin during the course of this trial. They were going to have a girls' night out. It had been a long time. Alexis dropped her baby off at her grandmother's house and borrowed her mother's car, Jessica's car, and you'll hear from Jessica as well. Alexis and Caitlin went back to their apartment on White Street to get ready for the night. So it's about 7 or 8 o'clock. They are doing their makeup and getting dressed and just doing normal things, getting ready for the evening. The defendant, Mr. Scanlon, was there at first, and he was, as you will hear, described by the witnesses, acting mopey and sad and saying things like, "I can't believe my family is leaving." Around 8 o'clock, the defendant went over to his friend's house. Alexis and Caitlin didn't make plans with the defendant. They didn't intend to meet up with him that night. She was looking forward to spending the night with Caitlin. Now, about this same time, Alexis actually changed her Facebook profile to single and started talking to a guy at work that she had a crush on. His name, you will hear, is Scott Burns. And Scott Burns will testify in this case as well. Scott and Alexis worked together, and that night, Alexis and Scott made plans to meet up and have a drink. About 9 p.m., Friday night, Alexis and Caitlin go to a bar in Westfield called the Maple Leaf Cafe. And things are going fine. Scott, the guy she was interested in, and one of his co-workers showed up about an hour or so after Alexis got there, and they were hitting it off. Alexis and Scott were flirting and talking to each other. He was buying them drinks. But you'll hear from Alexis's cousin, Caitlin, that she kept checking her cell phone and was vigilant to see where the defendant physically was, because they shared their location together. And what you will hear is that the defendant was at his friend's house, which is what she anticipated. So at that point, all things were going fine. Now, a little bit later in the night, Alexis and Scott really started to hit it off, and they were at the bar at the Maple Leaf kissing. Sometime around then, the defendant shows up at the Maple Leaf with a friend. Caitlin went over to Alexis immediately and said, "Hey, cool it. Blake just got here." They decided they wanted to go someplace else. So they paid their tabs and they went over to another bar in town. This is probably around 11 or 11:30 now, called Whip City Brewery, or the Whip. So they paid their tabs, they went over to the Whip. They told Scott and his friend where they were going so they could meet up with them. And as they began to walk outside, the defendant rushed after Alexis, and there was a conversation that Caitlin couldn't hear, but again, things seemed fine. Around 11:30 at night, Alexis and Caitlin drove over to the second bar, the Whip, and Scott and his friend showed up shortly thereafter, as was planned. 30 minutes or so after that, the defendant once again showed up at the Whip. And this time he was alone. His friend wasn't there. Caitlin Avery will describe the defendant to you, standing in the corner alone, staring at Alexis and Scott, who were still flirting. And I expect you'll see some pictures of the inside of these two bars. They're not big. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but you'll hear from a Westfield detective who is familiar with both places, obviously, who took some pictures. These are small venues, so it's fair to say that the defendant saw what was happening with Alexis and Scott. At some point in the night, Caitlin Avery actually grabbed the defendant, Blake, who she obviously knew, and brought him outside and said something to him like, "What are you doing? You know you're breaking up." And then the defendant said something like, "How could she do this to me? And why the fuck is that dude hugging her?" Caitlin goes, "Listen, they're co-workers, don't worry about it, it's not a big deal." But again, they're breaking up, so it shouldn't have been. The defendant says, "If I see that shit again, I'm gonna fuck him up." There will be no question in your minds at the conclusion of this trial as to who killed Alexis Avery in the early morning hours of January 12th of 2019. There will be no question at all about how Alexis Avery died. The medical examiner will tell you 28 sharp force wounds, any number of which were potentially fatal in and of themselves. Once you hear all the facts, listen to all the witnesses, and see all of the evidence in this case, I suggest to you that you will also have no doubts in your mind, no questions at all left, that the defendant committed first-degree murder.
But you will learn that this trial, and when we put folks on trial for a crime like this, that it's not just as simple as innocent or guilty, convict or acquit. You'll be told what the law is in this Commonwealth and what it means when we talk about first-degree murder and second-degree murder and other forms of homicide. And so, if you experienced any relief at all when I did suggest to you how I expect this case to end, I would also say that in some ways what you're being asked to do is among the hardest things we ever ask a jury to do, which is to think very carefully and listen very carefully to all of the evidence and not just focus on the outcome, but all of the circumstances surrounding that. So ADA Green has suggested here that this is all very straightforward. But I would suggest, and I will tell you that I expect that the evidence is not going to show you that was simply that it was over. The evidence is going to show that Miss Avery and Mr. Scanlon, in fact, had a lengthy on-again, off-again relationship. And that at the time that this happened, they had been on again for quite a long time, since their daughter was born in August and since before that, through her pregnancy. And that on January 11th, yes, you are going to hear evidence that they were contemplating the end of the relationship, but they still had a home together. They still lived together. They were still parenting together. I'm looking at a group of folks who surely with their life experience can appreciate that the evidence is going to show that as young people who had been together a long time and as brand new parents, who the evidence is going to show had both hoped and had every expectation of parenting that child together, that even if they weren't together, that as long as they were still living in the same home and until they were not, that they were still operating with this certain kind of relationship. Now here's what's not in dispute. Ms. Avery hooked up that night with a coworker, a man that she had not been out with previously. She wasn't carrying on a long-term affair with this young man. That was the first night that they had been together. And it's not in dispute that when Mr. Scanlon came to the whip, they weren't just flirting, but that she was making out. Miss Avery was making out with Mr. Burns. And then, knowing full well that he was at the bar, went directly outside and had sex with Mr. Burns in his truck.
All hanging out, they were flirting, they were kissing, we were taking shots together. They were just in general having a good time with each other.
Okay. At some point in the evening, did you again notice Mr. Scanlon at the whip?
Yeah, actually, out of nowhere, I looked up and I seen him standing off into the side by the pool tables, kind of just staring at us.
All right. Now, you said that at the first place he was with a friend.
Yeah.
All right. What about at the second place?
No, he arrived alone.
Okay. Well, did you see him with anybody while you were there?
No.
All right. And just describe again, as best you can recall, where Mr. Scanlon was.
When I noticed him?
Yes.
Over by the pool tables, standing off in the corner.
All right. And where were Alexis and Scott?
At the end of a U-shaped bar. So at the end of the U.
All right. Did you talk to Mr. Scanlon?
I did.
And did you initiate that conversation?
I did.
How did you do that?
When I noticed him standing there and he went to come over and talk to Alexis and ask her, what was going on, who was Scott. Alexis introduced Scott to him and said, "This is my coworker, Scott." And then I had pulled Blake out to the patio and I told him, "What are you doing? This isn't going to, help anything."
So that's sustained as to what she said. Ask the next question.
But you had a conversation with him outside on the patio?
Yes.
All right. What did he say to you?
Hold on, I'm sorry. I remember having the conversation with him, and then as I was telling him whatever, he looked over and seen Alexis and Scott hugging, and he said, "Why the fuck are they hugging like that?"
Okay.
And if he keeps seeing that, he was going to fuck him up.
All right. So he said that to you?
Yes.
All right.
After a little bit, I noticed she wasn't in the bar anymore, so I went outside to look for her, and I seen her standing up against her mom's car, and Blake was standing in front of her, kind of standing over her. And when I walked out, I, said, "Get away from her." And she said, "Oh, he's bothering me."
Objection, Your Honor.
Okay.
Did he say anything to you?
That he was trying to help her find the key.
Okay. What happened after that interaction?
I had them go separate ways. I went outside and I told Alexis to go in one door, and I told
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Where did you go, and where did she go, if you know?
she went into the main door or the side door on the left side of the property, and I went around to the front door where you get ID'd, and I went back in that way.
All right. So now I want to jump forward to about 1 o'clock in the morning or so. Did you have eyes on Alexis at this point? Could you see her in the bar?
No,
All right. Did you know where she was at that time?
I did not.
All right. Was the defendant still at the bar?
Yes,
All right.
Did he ask you any questions about Alexis?
he did. He was asking me where she was and what she was doing, and I showed him my phone that I was calling her right in front of him. Look, she's not answering me either. I don't know where she's at.
Okay. And you were trying to locate her?
Yes.
And why is that?
She was my ride home, and because it's my little cousin, I want to know what's going on with her.
Yep. Did you find her to get a ride home that night?
I did not.
I'm sorry?
I did not.
Okay. I'm going to display Exhibit 44. These are numbered 1 through 7, so just for the record, I'm displaying page 6 of 44. You see that image on the monitor?
Yeah, it's actually right behind you as well.
And so the blue is messages that you sent to Alexis's phone,
Yes.
and the white are messages that you got back from Alexis's phone.
Yes.
And is the picture over here in the corner, is that Alexis?
Yeah.
Hard to tell, but all right. And this message, he probably left after caught me fucking someone in truck, LOL. Anything seem odd to you
Objection, Your
about
Honor.
that message?
Overruled.
Just very specifically, that reply you got. Did that seem off to you? Just yes or no?
Yes.
You obviously knew Alexis very well.
Yes.
And did you know how she normally spoke and things like
Yes.
that?
And what's the phone number you're calling from?
I don't know.
Okay. And what's going on today?
Bleeding out. I killed my girlfriend after I caught her cheating on me.
Okay. We're gonna help out here now.
Okay.
Okay, how old are you, sir? What do you mean by bleeding out, sir?
I cut my wrist.
You cut your wrist?
Hopefully, yes. Passed out. I thought it went up.
Okay, are you feeling violent?
No.
Do you have weapons with you?
No. It needs help. That's all.
Where are you right now?
I'm in my bedroom laying down trying to breathe.
Okay. Is this a suicide attempt?
Yeah.
Okay, and you're... Is your bleeding serious?
Yes. Body lost a lot of blood.
Okay. Alright. Alright, I'm sending the paramedics to help you now. Stay in line. I'll tell you exactly what to do next. Okay. I'm going to tell you how to stop the bleeding. Listen carefully to make sure we do it right, okay?
I think it's already started to clot, so.
Okay, well, we're just going to do this though, okay?
Okay.
If you can get a clean, dry cloth or towel and place it right on the wound and press down firmly and don't lift it up to look.
Okay.
Okay, have you done that?
Yeah, I got a blanket.
Okay. Alright. Is the bleeding controlled now?
Yeah.
Okay. Alright, help is on the way. From now on, don't have anything to eat or drink. It might make you sick or cause further problems. Don't move
I'm
around.
already vomiting.
Okay. Just rest in a comfortable position for you, okay?
Okay.
I'll stay on line with you as long as I can. If anything changes, just let me know and tell me when the paramedics get there. Okay. So are you still laying on bed?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, what's your name, sir?
Blake.
Blake? What's your last name, Blake? Scanlon? Okay, Blake. Blake, what happened to your girlfriend?
Copper cheated on me.
And how did you do that?
Bastard.
You stabbed her? Is she there?
Yeah, she's been pissed and struck. I passed out the bleeding. I passed it out. I thought I was dead. I'm not.
So she's been there since Friday. She's been dead since Friday.
Friday morning, I believe. Yeah.
Have you told anyone about it?
Yeah. I just haven't had enough strength to finish training, so.
Okay. What's your girlfriend's name, Blake?
Alexis Avery.
Alexis Avery?
She was useless and mentally useless, and she
Okay. We're gonna get you help right now, Blake. They're on their way already, okay?
Okay.
Is the door unlocked, Blake?
No.
The door is not unlocked? Are you able to just get to the door and unlock it?
Try.
Okay, I'm gonna stand behind you while you try to do that, okay? Alright. Blake, just take your time to do it and just let me know when you're able to get there, okay?
Okay,
The door's unlocked, okay, you just rest and just keep breathing for me, okay, Blake?
Okay.
You're doing a good job. We have people up there almost there,
Okay.
okay? So, do you still have your wounds covered? You do still have it covered? Blake, you still there? Blake? Can you hear me, Blake? Okay, do you still have your arms covered?
Yes.
You still putting pressure on your wounds? Blake, do you see anybody outside?
No.
No, you don't.
Anything.
You can't see anyone. And you said you're on the second floor?
They have to go to the back of the driveway.
They have to go to the back of the driveway? Okay. And you're on the second floor. Okay, we have people coming to you. You're on the couch still, Blake?
Yes.
Okay. Is the back door unlocked?
Yes.
Okay. You're doing great, Blake.
All right, that's it.
They're here? Okay.
Yes.
Are you talking to them now, Blake?
Yes.
Who's on scene with you?
Got it. That won't be my blood. No. I need an ambulance. Blood out, that's not so. I can't even move.
Is that the end of the recording?
Yes.
I mean, we had spoke here and there, but that was kind of it. Just normal work stuff.
Okay. And on January 11th of 2019, it's a Friday night, did you end up going out to a couple of bars in Westfield?
Yes.
All right. And prior to going out to those bars, had you communicated with Alexis Avery at all?
Yes.
And how did you do that? Like, what form of communication?
Snapchat.
Okay. And do you remember if that you made plans through Snapchat to meet at a certain time?
Yes. We made plans to go to the Maple Leaf.
And at that point in time, did you know anything about Alexis Avery's relationship status, or what you believe to be her relationship status?
I believe that I knew she was single.
And how did you know that? Or what made you believe that?
Through Facebook.
All right. And when you say Facebook, just describe what you mean.
I looked her up and saw that she was single on Facebook.
Okay. under like the status or whatever?
Yes.
All right. And who contacted who first? Did she contact, who contacted who?
I'm not sure.
Okay. But in any event, you did have some communication that night through Snapchat.
Yes.
All right. And as a result of those conversations, did you go to a place in Westfield?
Yes.
Where did you go?
We went to the Maple Leaf.
All right. And are you familiar with that place?
Yes.
And did you go with anybody?
Yes, we went with a few people from work.
Okay. And was Alexis there?
Yes.
All right. Was she with anybody that you knew or met that night?
She was with her cousin.
All right. Do you remember her name by any chance?
I think it's Caitlin.
All right. And had you met Caitlin before that night?
No.
All right. So just describe what you and Alexis were doing, just kind of in general. What were you doing at the bar?
We were just hanging out, talking, hanging out with work friends.
Okay. Do you know approximately, again, it's a long time ago, what time you got to the Maple Leaf?
I would say 9:30.
Okay. And while you were there, you mentioned that you were talking to Alexis. Did you called her Lexi at that
Lexi.
time? And how did she seem while you were having these talks and conversations with her?
She seemed, okay. I know she was kind of on the lookout for her ex-boyfriend.
How did you know that?
Just through talking to her.
I don't know the answer. Ask it. It's
You and Lexi?
Yes.
All right. And just describe what you mean by that.
We just started flirting and we ended up kissing.
Okay. And where were you in the bar, if you remember?
I believe we were at the bar.
Okay. So you weren't like in the bathroom or in the
No.
hallway? Or in the open?
Yes.
Yeah. And did somebody else arrive at the bar that night, if you remember?
Just my work friends.
Did you know who Blake Scanlon was back then?
No.
Had you ever met him before?
No.
Do you know if he showed up at that bar, that first bar?
I don't believe he was at the Maple Leaf, no.
You don't recall seeing him there?
No.
At some point, did you go to another establishment that night?
Yes.
Where else did you go?
The whip.
And whose idea was it to go over to the whip?
I think it was a collective group decision.
Yourself and Lexi and Caitlin?
Yes.
So you kind of all knew where you were going next.
Yes.
And did you go over to the whip?
Yes.
And again, do you know approximately what time you might have gotten there?
I'm not sure.
Okay, that's fine. When you got to the whip, did you see Lexi again?
Yes.
And just describe again how the night was progressing between you and Lexi.
We just kind of, kept flirting and kissing and hanging out at the bar.
So, if you know, who initiated like the flirting, or was it kind of more mutual?
I would say it's mutual.
All right. And was her cousin there at the second bar, if you know?
Yes.
Did anybody else arrive at the second bar that you know of?
Just the same work group that we were with.
All right. And again, do you recall seeing Mr. Scanlon at that bar?
I believe he was there at some point, yes.
All right. But again, you don't really know him, right?
Correct.
At some point in the evening, did you and Lexi go outside of the bar?
Yes.
And where did you go?
To my truck.
All right. Just briefly, what kind of truck was it? Just so we have an idea.
F-150.
All right. 2 doors, 4 doors?
4-door. Crew cab, I believe.
Okay. And when you went out into the truck, what happened?
We were continuing flirting and we ended up having sex.
Okay. Where were you in the truck? Just so I know, front, back?
Back seat.
All right. And what happened as this was occurring?
The front driver's side door, or the front passenger side door opened.
And tell me what you saw.
There was a guy standing there. We kind of separated ourselves, and
You and Lexi.
correct.
And did that guy say anything?
Just to grab her stuff and to go.
Did he say anything to you specifically?
No, I do not think so.
All right. That person that opened the door to your truck, do you see him in the courtroom here today?
Objection, Your Honor.
Yes. Sorry.
Could you describe the demeanor of the person that opened the door? Like, just how was he acting?
Very calm.
Was his voice raised?
No.
And after that person said something like, "Get your stuff, let's go," what did Lexi do?
We kind of separated ourselves, and she started getting her stuff. She had said that, I didn't want to be with you, I wanted to be with him, which was me,
Who'd she say that to?
to Blake.
The person that was at the
Yes.
door? And did you see where they went after she got out of your truck?
I did not.
Okay. Was there any sort of screaming or struggle between the two of them that you recall?
No.
What did you do after she left your truck?
I called for an Uber.
Okay. And why did you do that?
We had been drinking,
Do you recall approximately what time you called for that Uber?
I would say 1:15, 1:20ish.
Did you actually take a screenshot of your Uber receipt?
Yes.
All right. Now, folks, without getting into specifics, did you try and contact Lexi the next day?
Yes.
And how did you do that? Do you remember what social media or how you did that?
Snapchat?
All right. And did you get a response from her?
No.
At some point, did you learn that something had happened that night?
Eventually, yes.
Eventually, yes. Who was Alexis Avery?
She's my daughter.
And what was her date of birth?
April 20th, 1998.
May I approach the witness?
Yes.
Your Honor? Tell me who's depicted in that photograph.
Alexis.
And do you know approximately when this was taken?
That was her pregnancy photo shoot, so sometime in 2018.
No, I would go on this.
Exhibit 1.
Exhibit 1.
Thank you.
May I introduce this?
Yes.
Displaying exhibit number 1. That was your daughter.
Yes.
Is your daughter still with us?
She's not.
Do you know who Blake Scanlon is?
I do.
And how do you know him?
He dated my daughter on and off.
Do you see him in the courtroom?
I do.
Could you just point to him and describe a color shirt he's wearing?
It's right over there. And a jacket.
Your Honor, may the record reflect in-court identification of the defendant?
She pointed in the defendant's direction, yes.
Thank you. Who is Darla?
Darla's my granddaughter. We adopted her, but yes, Alexis had a baby with Blake.
And when was Darla born?
She was born August 1st, 2018.
Do you know approximately how long Alexis and the defendant had dated off and on?
I want to say I remember 2016, we did like a family vacation. I remember him being there. So I would say around that time through January 1st.
And in June of 2018, where were your daughter and the defendant living?
On White Street in Westfield, an apartment.
And a few weeks before January 11th, New Year's Day or so, did you have an occasion to see Alexis?
I did.
And did she tell you anything about her relationship with the defendant?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
May we approach briefly sidebar?
So during the course of the trial, we have
When was the last time that you actually saw Alexis, if you remember?
Yes, it was the evening of January 11th. It was a Friday
And where did you see her?
at my house.
And why was she at your house?
She came to borrow the car with Caitlin,
Okay. Borrow whose car?
my car.
All right. And what kind of car was that?
It was a 2007 Mazda CX-9.
Do you know why she was borrowing your car that night, if you know?
Yeah, like their car didn't, Caitlin's car didn't run well, and they just wanted to have like a safe, decent car for the evening.
Okay. Do you recall approximately what time she came over to borrow your car?
It was in the evening. I don't remember the exact time.
Okay. And then Saturday, what did you do?
I was at work, and I was trying to get a hold of her, so I was texting her.
Okay. And where was Darla on Friday night, the baby?
She was at my mom's house.
Okay. And does mom have a name or nickname that you called her?
Wella?
Saturday morning, if you know, did Alexis pick up Wella?
Saturday morning, no.
Okay. Was she supposed to?
She was supposed to pick up the baby.
At some point in time, you mentioned you tried to get in touch with
I did.
Alexis. Is that right?
Yes.
And what is your phone number, if you know? Had back in 2018, 2019?
Yes.
And did you have Alexis's phone number programmed into your phone?
I did.
Do you happen to recall that number offhand?
No, because I don't remember anybody's. Just go right to the name and dial it.
I
It's
understand.
unfortunate.
If you saw it, you think it would help jog your
Yes.
memory? May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. Yes.
Did that help your memory?
Yes.
And what do you recall your daughter's phone number being?
The 556.
557?
Yeah.
Were you ever able to physically speak with Alexis during Saturday, January 12th?
No.
How did you communicate with her?
It was a text message.
To her phone?
Correct.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm going to show you this item. Do you recognize that item?
I do.
What do you recognize that item to be?
Alexis's phone.
White iPhone with gold sparkly case.
Yes.
ID only.
E for identification.
And you mentioned also that
Let me explain to the jury. Matters marked for identification are not exhibits, evidence in the case at this time. All right?
you mentioned that Alexis borrowed your car.
Yes.
You recognize what this is,
It's the key fob for my car.
and the key's actually in here.
Correct.
So this is like your spare set.
Yeah, that was a spare.
I have this marked for identification as well.
ID only.
F.
F.
Did you hear from did you hear her voice at any point on Saturday?
I never heard her voice again since she picked up the car.
And you continued to try and communicate with her?
I did.
Did you call?
I did.
Did you text
Yes.
again and again?
Over and over.
Just want to show you these 10 pages. Take a minute and just look through them without saying anything. When you're done, look up, please. Can you just tell me what those pictures are of generally?
On the text messages that I was sending out and text messages I was getting back on Saturday and Sunday.
And just so we're all clear, there's blue messages.
Yeah, those are.
Who's the, if you know, who's sending the blue messages?
I am.
And there's actually a picture of you right next to the
Correct.
message. So that was programmed into a phone, presumably.
Yes.
And messages are to Alexis at the top.
Alexis's, yep.
I have the identification as well, please.
ID G.
G. Did you try and contact Alexis again on Sunday morning?
I did.
Could you describe your level of concern at that point?
I was very concerned.
Overruled.
I was very concerned. I hadn't heard her voice, and I asked her to call me so I can hear her voice. And I wasn't getting that call.
And where was Darla Sunday morning?
She was with me at the time. I went to pick her up instead since Alexis wasn't.
Would it be unlike Alexis to leave her baby for 2 days?
Absolutely.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examine.
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much.
Sergeant, I'm displaying now Exhibit 51. Can you see that image?
Yes.
And what do you recognize that image to be?
Blake Scanlon in with some bandages around his wrists, left and right hands.
Depicting or displaying Exhibit 53, Can you tell me what is depicted in that image?
Again, Blake Scanlon with those scrubs lifted up, tattoo over his heart with the name Darla.
Displaying Exhibit 56, can you tell us what is depicted in this image?
Yes, again, Blake Scanlon, just with his hands focused on, moved out to the sides. I've seen our crime scene services personnel do that when they're taking photos. Move your hands away from your body so we can get a better image of what exactly that is. But same individual, just a different perspective.
This is Exhibit 57. What are we looking at there?
That appears to be Blake Scanlon's right hand, and the injuries on his hand, perhaps to his knuckles, and then some blood in the fingernail area.
This is Exhibit 59. Can you describe generally where you're looking at in that particular image?
The palm of Blake Scanlon's right hand is shown, his wrist there bandaged up, and then some blood or an injury to those calluses on his right hand, on his lower right hand, his ring finger and pinky.
This is number 60, just displaying that briefly. Again, what are we looking at here?
The image of the left hand, left wrist taped up with some medical bandages, and then what the left palm looked like during that booking process. Dried blood and or injuries to that hand.
This is Exhibit 61. And again, what are we looking at here?
The back of Blake Scanlon's calves and bare feet.
And number 62, just briefly, what are we looking at here?
And the front of Blake Scanlon's legs, the front of his calves, his knees, and then his bare feet, with some red-brown substance believed to be blood on the right foot at least, and perhaps the left big toe. I think I could see some red-brown staining there too.
Tell us the depth of injury A.
A was about 1/4 of an inch deep,
How about injury B?
3/8 of an inch deep,
How about C?
3/8 of an inch deep,
Injury D?
3/8 of an inch,
Injury E?
5/8 of an inch,
Injury F?
1 inch,
Okay. How about G?
G is a superficial wound, so it was not very deep.
Okay. And what about H?
Same thing, also a superficial wound, not very deep.
Okay. Observations in the kitchen area.
Yes, I did.
And just generally, what were your initial observations in the kitchen?
In the kitchen area, I observed various items along with a deceased individual identified to me as Alexis Avery. I observed to the left side of her blankets, pillows, a knife, a glass cup. There were other additional items in the kitchen, including cigarette butts, plastic trash cans, or trash bags, excuse me. Additionally, I made documentation of Alexis Avery and noticed that she had several injuries to her stomach area, back, neck, and face. In addition to that, I documented that she was wearing a pink hooded sweatshirt that was partially pulled up, black leggings, and a pair of mismatched socks.
Thank you. And as far as evidence that you often describe as red-brown stains, can you tell me what you're looking for when you observe these red-brown stains in a location?
There were red-brown stains throughout the apartment based on the number of bleeders, and then looking at the stains themselves to separate them by size, shape, distribution, and also location. I would then proceed with designating them with a letter and proceeding with our screening test for blood. All of these stains would be documented in my notes or diagrams as I'm processing them, and the testing results would then be performed and documented as well. Once the tests are complete, and I believe that if the test is positive for the screening test for the presence of blood, I will then use swabs, which are Q-tips essentially, and I will moisten them with water and collect those red-brown stains for further testing back at the lab.
Thank you. And I just want to ask you, go back a little bit. You mentioned a screening test for the presence of blood. Is that correct?
Yes.
And just describe for the jurors what you mean by screening test.
Screening tests are tests that we perform initially on evidence where we suspect biological materials. We have them for blood and semen. For blood specifically, at the time we were using the orthotolidine test. This test is used, it was done by taking a filter paper and rubbing a portion of it against a suspected blood stain, which we call red-brown stains, and then adding 2 chemicals. If an immediate blue color developed, then that would be a positive result for a screening test for blood. As I have been saying, screening tests, these tests are not confirmatory. They are known to have false positives, but they are a preliminary result that we can use in order to then collect them and perform, if not limited, additional testing back at the lab.
Thank you. And in this particular investigation at 92 White Street, is it fair to say there were many, many red-brown stains?
Yes.
And you performed screening tests on a large number of those items?
I performed screening tests on approximately 33 stains.
All right. And did you take some of those stains back to your laboratory?
Based on positive results, I did then perform collection on those stains.
And back at the laboratory, do you perform a confirmatory test for blood?
I will, once this is assigned in the criminalistics unit, I will then reevaluate the case, as there could be hundreds of pieces of evidence to look at. I will then determine the most forensically relevant items, and I will go through and examine those. Out of the many swabs I did collect and transport back, or even other items, I selected some of those stains, or the swabs from those stains, for further testing, which is the confirmatory testing for blood.
All right. And so just a couple of specific items. There was a suitcase in the kitchen, is that correct? A suitcase tag?
The suitcase was in the storage area within the apartment, not in the kitchen.
Did you perform confirmatory testing on the red-brown stains on that item?
I did.
And what was the result, if you recall?
Testing for the presence of blood was positive, indicating the presence of human blood.
Did you perform or did you collect a red-brown stain from the kitchen floor between the legs of Miss Avery?
Yes, I did.
Did you perform confirmatory testing on that swab?
Yes, I did.
And what was the result?
Testing for the presence of blood was positive on the mentioned stain between Alexis Avery's legs on the ground, on the floor, indicating the presence of human blood.
Did you perform or did you collect a swab from a knife on the kitchen floor next to a blanket, which was labeled as placard 8?
I did. There were several stains that I did further testing. I would need to refer to my notes my report for all of that.
May he refer to his report, Your Honor?
Yes. Thank you. Can you repeat your question, please?
Certainly, and I'm referring to item 2-49. Did you perform any testing on a kitchen knife or a knife that was recovered from that residence?
Yes, I did.
Could you describe the testing you performed on that item?
I documented any visible staining on the knife. I then designated stains A through E. I performed testing on those items, on those areas. A screening test for the presence of stain E was positive. However, human blood was not detected. A testing for the presence of blood on stains A through D was positive, indicating the presence of human blood.
Thank you. And item 2-50. This was another knife that was located on scene. Did you perform testing on that particular item?
Yes, I did.
And I'm going to start with the first and most obvious. They were not together. She was not his girlfriend. Alexis broke up with Blake 11 days before this happened. The defendant acknowledges that on the 10th of January. He acknowledges that on the 11th of January. Manslaughter requires, again, some sort of sudden revelation of infidelity. The defendant had spent hours on January 11th of 2019 following Alexis around, watching her be romantic with another man. He watched them together at the Maple Leaf. He saw them together at the Whip. He even told Caitlin, "I don't like what I'm seeing." Ladies and gentlemen, not liking what you're seeing is not an excuse. It is not justification to take somebody's life,
Objection, Your Honor.
to stab them.
Go ahead, sir.
It is not a reason to stab somebody 28 times. That is something very different. That is not manslaughter. That is first-degree murder.
The judge is going to be explaining to you that in charging Blake Scanlon with first-degree murder, that the Commonwealth has taken upon itself to prove every element of murder beyond a reasonable doubt. And of course, that's their burden. But the judge is also going to be explaining to you that in charging Mr. Scanlon that way, they have also taken upon themselves the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that there was no mitigation. And the judge is going to explain to you what that means. And in this case, specifically what it means is that the judge is going to talk to you about how that there are some things that are so, in the experience of human experience, that reasonable people can experience overwhelm, anger, emotion, such that they can't control themselves. And that is something that you can consider. And what this means when you begin your deliberation, you must, for a moment, at least in your discussions, put aside the outcome, the very horrible, terrible outcome, and spend some time wrestling with what led up to this tragedy. Now, so I am doing something that I don't do very often in this job. I am asking you to find Blake Scanlon guilty. But I'm also asking you to follow the law, to hold the Commonwealth to its burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt everything that it is charged. Over and over again, Judge Callan has said to you, you have to put, and we said it at sidebar when we were selecting you as a jury, over and over again we said you must put aside the anger, the emotion, and the sympathy. And these are all things I very much actually hope you experience when you think about the outcome of this and when you look at those pictures. I wouldn't want a jury that didn't have a reaction to that. That's not what this system is about. But I hold you to your word and the oath that you took. And after speaking to all of you, I believe that you're on this jury because you committed to doing as you said you would, just putting aside the emotion and the anger at the outcome, which is understandable. And considering everything that went into what happened. And I do want to close by saying, when you return a verdict of guilty, as I ask you to do for voluntary manslaughter, you're not saying that anything about what Blake did was okay. I want to be really clear about that. This is not the law saying that, and this is not you saying with that verdict, that anything that Blake did that night was reasonable or excusable or justifiable in any way. That is a much different thing than what I'm asking of you today and what the law demands of you today. When you return that verdict of guilty for voluntary manslaughter, you will be saying that Blake Scanlon is guilty of a terrible and serious violent crime, a crime worthy of a tremendous amount of punishment. But the Commonwealth has not proven beyond a reasonable doubt everything that it must prove for Blake Scanlon to be convicted of murder. Find him guilty. Find him guilty of voluntary manslaughter.
8, count 1, charging murder. You, upon your oath, say that the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree by reason of extreme atrocity and cruelty. So say you, Madam Foreperson. So say you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Yes.
Has this verdict been unanimous? Count 2, charging assault and battery by means of a dangerous weapon. You, upon your oath, say that the defendant is guilty. So say you, Madam Foreperson.
Yes.
So say you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Yes.
Has this verdict been unanimous?
Yes.
Thank you. You may be seated. Sir, you may be seated.
All right, members of the jury.